Hi everyone, welcome back to GI Live London, and next up we're hosting Alden Kroll and Eric Peterson from Valve, who are beaming in live from the west coast of America again this year to answer questions about every aspect of Steam and also the Steam Deck console. So Alden and Eric, can you hear me? Are you out there?
We can, yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
Good stuff, brilliant. Okay, so how do you want to do this? Shall we start with some of the more common questions that you get asked from developers about Steam, and then we can maybe take some of the questions that are going to be asked away from the audience. Have to think of some better ones.
Sounds great. Yeah, I think getting started with the frequently asked questions works great for us.
Great stuff. So visibility and features. So this is something that I think you probably get asked a lot about getting featured on Steam, on the Steam front page. And how does discovery work? Is it to do with an algorithm? Is there someone to speak to? How does that all work with Steam?
Sure, happy to answer this question. You're right, this is the most commonly asked question. I was just in Tokyo last week, actually, and developers there had exactly the same set of questions about how visibility works. So I think it's good to start kind of talking philosophically about how we think about Steam and kind of how we build Steam. And then I promise eventually I will get to the answer to this question on how it works. So first of all, the way that we build Steam, we put a lot of work into building trust and relationship with players so that they know that when they come to Steam, they're going to find games that they're interested in playing, and that there's a community there that actually matters to them, and that we're also building features that actually are meaningful to them. And at the same time, we also work really, really hard to build features that help developers run their business. And ultimately, our goal is to help developers meet customers and to have that be that bridge to help the customer find that game that they're hoping for, and to have developers find that customer. So we've learned that Steam is just really, really big, and it continues to grow year over year. And what we've learned is with that growth, there's come a tremendous amount of diversity in the player base. So there are players that like to play all kinds of games. There are people that like to play just shooters, or there are people that like to play the latest visual novels or rhythm games, or all kinds of games on Steam. And what we've learned is that there's really room for everybody to succeed on Steam, because it's such a big platform and there's such a diverse player set. And so, we don't really work like some other platforms or consoles. You don't need to know someone on the inside to get featured on Steam. And we haven't built Steam to be that way. There's no secret handshake or an email that you need to know to get featured. Ultimately, anyone can get featured on Steam with your game. And the reason we do that is just we want to think globally about our customers and to try to help them to find what they want to play. So we do get a lot of questions about the front page. And one thing that I've learned is that developers may or may not know about is the fact that Steam is customized for every single player. So Alden's Steam is a bit different than my Steam, when we both are logged in. And that's because the Steam is really showing us a different set of games based off of the games that I play or have wishlisted. Curators I might follow, games that my friends are playing all the time. I might recommend, hey, your friends are playing this game. Do you want to check it out? Top sellers, which are also regionalized. So customers in Japan, where I was last week, are going to see kind of a different set of top sellers than, a customer in the UK.
Yeah.
New releases and updates. And anyway, we talk a lot more about this in some videos that you can find. But, one way that you can check this is by going to Steam and being logged in and then logged out and seeing if there's a difference in kind of the games that you're seeing. But ultimately, the answer to the question is the vast majority of what you see presented on Steam actually happens automatically, because the way we build Steam is so that it will show people games that they're going to be the most interested in. And so you don't need to know someone at Steam to get featured on Steam. And in fact, if you're a developer, you should be able to go into your marketing and visibility page on your app and actually see where your game is being featured in any given time. And you can actually see that it's appeared on the front page or in various content hubs and other things. So all of that happens automatically. And, we don't sell advertising on Steam. That's another thing that I should mention to developers, because a lot of times people say, well, how much did those people pay to get on the front page? Or how much does it cost to get the big banner on top of Steam? And we just don't sell advertising. That isn't how we work in any way. We don't accept that at all. And Honestly, the very little curation that we do are things like daily deals, the midweek madness, and weekend deals. And those are all also driven by customer interest and really what customers want to see. And we use metrics to kind of decide, what it is that customers would be most interested in seeing. So, ultimately, Steam just reacts to customer interest and bursts of customer activity, and that honestly happens really, really fast.
Yeah, yeah. And in a sort of question kind of related to that, really, with wish lists, and is it better to encourage wish lists or pre-purchases? Does the Steam store algorithm pick up first day sales as a result of wish lists more than just pre-orders? How does that work, and what should developers do to try and maximize their coverage on that first essential day or day or two?
Yeah, we get a lot of questions about wish lists and how they work on Steam. And I think the really important thing to keep in mind is that wish lists are really a collection of fans that are excited to buy your game, whether that's at launch or following launch sometime when the game goes on discount. They're people that are excited or interested in your game. Collecting that audience ahead of release is only going to be more and more valuable as you get to release day and you hit that release button, because Steam will notify all of them and send them an email, say that game you're interested in is now available. The exact number of people that wishlist your game doesn't really matter so much. It's an indication of how many people have been made aware of your game and know that it exists and know that it's coming and are excited about it. And if you get to launch day and you have 0 people that have wishlisted your game, probably means that not a lot of people know that you even are making a game and that game might exist. And so then when you hit the launch button, it's going to be the first time that everybody is hearing about that game. So it's useful to think about it as a way of kind of measuring what kind of audience building you're doing along the way as you're developing your game. And are you bringing your audience along with you through that development journey and helping them get excited about the game?
Yeah.
The specific between kind of pre-purchasing and wish listing towards announcement, we find that generally speaking, really highly anticipated bigger titles benefit from or can benefit from a pre-purchase, especially if they're giving away additional content or running a discount as part of that pre-purchase. So there's actually some reason for customers to put down that money well in advance of the launch of the game. For games that are not as well anticipated or well known, we don't see it as being necessarily that useful, because what happens is that actually does spread out the revenue that's attributed to sales of the game over that pre-purchase period, rather than having it all concentrated on launch day. So for mid-size or smaller games that are going into launch, you actually want as much purchase traffic as you can on that launch day, because that will send Steam the strongest signal about legitimate customer interest in your game.
Yeah, good stuff. Just a reminder to those in the audience and online, I'm just going to go through a few things that come up quite often, but do think of some questions and things which will be coming to at the end of my list of questions, so have a think about those. Just a little bit on the wish list thing. Is there there's no magic number for wish lists, so if you hit 10,000, you'll get on the front page. There's kind of, is there a target that people should be aiming at, or is that not something that happens?
There's no fixed number. There are a couple of lists that are driven by the wish listing rate for games. So those are, when you look at the the homepage, there's a little small section called upcoming or popular upcoming or upcoming. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but that uses a rate of wish listing within a recent period of time. And so that's not a fixed number. It's going to depend on how well are other games that are releasing soon also wish listing. But most of the time, we don't find it's that healthy to try to obsess over a specific number, and none of our systems are built with specific number thresholds in mind. So it's really just useful to think about, well, if I have 100 people that have wishlisted my game, does that seem like a lot of people that are aware of my game and are excited about it? Or if I have 10,000 people that have wishlisted it, does that seem like the right number of people that, does that give me a good indication that a bunch of people know about my game and are excited about it?
Yeah, good stuff. I want to go on to some of the features that developers could have from Steam in their games that maybe will help them get noticed more on the platform, or will help sell their game to people who use Steam a lot. What are the things? What are the 4 or 5 features that every game should have, like cloud save, for example? What are the things that players really look for?
Yeah, happy to answer this question. So, fundamentally, Steam features are just features that we built to help solve problems. A lot of times, those problems are problems that we ourselves ran up against in developing games, and then we kind of felt like, hey, we should build a feature that is going to help solve a problem for our own development teams, because we make games, but also this is something that could help a bunch of developers to solve a problem that they're facing, or they're tools that developers or publishers have come to us and say, hey, it would be really nice if Steam could help us to solve this problem. And so we built that. So we don't think about Steam features as something that is going to increase your visibility on Steam or something that we're pushing for the month. Sometimes I'll get that question from developers and say, hey, what feature are you pushing these days? And, if we implemented that feature, could that give us additional visibility?
Because that happens on other platforms, I think. If there's a specific technical thing they're looking at, like VR or something, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a natural question. The answer is, again, we work a bit differently than the other platforms. We don't really think about those things as something that we're like an initiative that we're pushing or something that we want every developer to use. Instead, it's, hey, is this helping you to reach your players? Is this helping your players have a better experience? Is this helping you to do something in your game that you otherwise couldn't do because you couldn't build that feature yourself? Things like Workshop, for instance, is a good example of something that might help enable you to do something with your game that you hadn't thought of before. But ultimately, we really think that there are a number of features that are kind of really helpful, to kind of be thinking about. Things like cloud save is a good example where, cloud save is one of those things that just makes life better for customers across the board and kind of makes things a lot easier. It's also really, really easy to implement and very simple. So, and that comes up later with Steam Deck, for example, is having the ability for a customer to play their game on their desktop, have that save go up to the cloud, and then be able to just instantly pick up their game on their Steam Deck and be able to pick up where they were playing previously. That's really helpful. But we really recommend that as a developer, we made this site partner.steamgames.com. It's kind of our main login for Steam, but you can go in there, and if you scroll around, we have a whole bunch of information about all the features that we have, and kind of the what they do for players, what they do for developers, and also kind of what level of difficulty or at what stage should you be implementing these features in your game development. So check it out, and it's kind of a menu for you to choose from on all the features that we offer. And of course, one thing that last mentioned is we don't charge for any of the features that we've built. So all of these are free to you to use anytime.
Yeah, good stuff. What's the best way of dealing with negative reviews or multiple negative reviews through like a vindictive group of players or something, where you're trying to manage that? How can companies deal with that, and how can they ask you for help, perhaps?
Yeah, so we've built some specific tools around helping deal with what we consider a review bomb.
Yeah.
For example,
exactly.
if a group of customers get upset about something that is not really related to the experience of playing the game, we might consider that a review bomb. There's actually a call for help button right on the review section. If you're signed in as a developer and you're looking at your store page and you're looking at your review chart, and you can see a bunch of stuff going on, there's actually a button right there to get a hold of us and ask for help. And that's a thing that we're going to take a look at. We're going to try to interpret what are customers talking about here. Is that related to the game? Because there are legitimate reasons where customers can be really upset with something that happens in the game, like a change that the developer made that makes a lot of their customers really upset. That can be legitimate feedback from customers.
Yeah.
In general, we look at reviews as a reflection of expectations by customers. And so if your game is being presented as one thing and customers get in and find that it's something else, or along the way of playing the game and shipping updates, the game suddenly changes dramatically from what customers thought they had originally purchased, those can all be reasons why customers might be upset. And they might be using reviews as a way to send some strong feedback to the developer that something is different from what they expected it should be. And so that might be I think the developer should look at how the game is being presented on the store page. Are the screenshots, is the description, is it accurate reflecting what the game is it complete, and is it honest and up to date?
Yeah.
One other thing to mention just about reviews is that as a developer, you're able to respond to customer reviews. So if you kind of felt like, hey, actually a customer is having a hard time with something, I'm going to help them to solve their problem, or maybe they had a misunderstanding about a feature and I can kind of help them to understand it. But ultimately, I think it's really valuable for developers to think more about review trends and the overall kind of sentiment of reviews rather than individual reviews. I've talked to developers who have games that have overwhelmingly positively reviewed games, games that are just wildly popularly reviewed, and they still obsess over like the 3 reviews that are negative because they find them frustrating. And that totally makes sense, of course, but as a developer, I think it's important for you to be, hey, what is the sentiment of the game in general? Like, are people giving me feedback about something, and not worrying about, like the 3 reviews that are negative because, that's at a certain point, it just becomes kind of unhealthy to worry about it too much.
Yeah, I think it's frustrating for developers that I talk to when, they get a negative review from someone and they've played the game for like 100 hours and you think, is it taking them that long to find out that they don't like the game? So it's, it's kind of dealing with that kind of thing, really. I'd like to move on to kind of a thing about pricing and discounting, because this is something that I hear a lot from developers as well about, game pricing, for example. Can a game be too cheap?
Maybe. Pricing is a really difficult thing, and it's also a really hard thing for us to give advice on. And part of the reason for that is that nobody knows the game better than you as the developer. We certainly don't. Sometimes developers will come to us and say, hey, what should we price our game? Should it be $19.99 or $14.99? And our answer is usually, actually, you will know that answer better than we will. Honestly, from our perspective, it's best for you to be doing research on what the competitive titles are to your game, what kind of value proposition you're providing for customers, what feels like a good value to you, what feels like a generous thing, because part of user reviews, for example, is kind of meeting expectations, right? So if you have a game that is that a customer might feel like should be a $20 game and it's a $60 game, that might affect their user reviews in some way. But pricing is really ultimately about what you think is a reasonable price for that. And then usually our recommendation is the more kind of generous you are, or the more feature that a customer gets for the price, generally they'll be kind of happier with the experience and happier overall. Typically, on Steam, you have the option to do whatever you like in terms of discounts. If you wanted to do a 40% launch discount, you could. But over time, we kind of tend to recommend kind of a normal progression of discounts over a longer period of time. But again, on Steam, there are anytime that we give general advice, there are people that don't follow it and they are successful. So we can it's hard to say point to one thing in particular and be like, never do this or always do this, because there's always a counter example of somebody, well, these guys did this and it worked really well. But in general, we think that pricing should be figured out by the developer, and just kind of using your best judgment and thinking about the competitive landscape, and discounts should probably be pretty reasonable and progressive over time.
Yeah, good stuff. What about sales? So do you give developers kind of heads up on like the summer sale, for example, and things like that, and developers kind of plan that into their kind of long tail of the sales of their game?
Yeah, so this has been a big part of what I've been working on recently, is building out our path forward for the regular themed sales and seasonal sales that we have been running. So, we run big seasonal sales, the autumn sale, the winter sale, the summer sale. We've been generally pretty good about announcing those far enough ahead of time to give developers time to plan around them. And then we've been running more and more of these themed sales where we shine a spotlight on a certain genre or theme or really niche area of Steam, perhaps, and really highlight those games. And that's where we're working on building out a calendar and trying to get to the point where we can announce those events to developers up to 6 months ahead of time, so that developers have time to plan their other promotions or other opportunities around that. We're still a little bit a ways from having that plan established so far out, but that's our goal, and hopefully over the rest of 2022 and into 2023 we can achieve that and be able to give developers a really clear idea of what opportunities are coming up over the next 6 months.
Yeah, and one of the things that follow-up questions I had was about case studies for that. I mean, are you thinking about using examples of previous games that have gone on a certain path, or do you think that is that was unique to that game and it might not work with someone else?
Yeah, I think as Eric mentioned, there's examples of things that work well and things that don't work well, and it's kind of all over the board because there's a lot of variables to take into account. So I recently had a conversation with a group of developers, and 2 of the 10 developers present talked about increasing the price of their game over time because they kept updating it and adding more and more content to it. They just felt like the value was increasing. And that worked really well for them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to work really well for other games. So it's really, you have to think a lot about what is the value that you're offering to customers and kind of look around as well as, what are the other kinds of games that are similar to yours, both in style, but also in scope and production quality as a way to get a sense of, is your game priced appropriately? Is it offering customers the value that they kind of expect out of that? And what is the price saying to customers about your game? I think there's perhaps a danger of underpricing your game and as a signal to customers that you don't have a lot of confidence that you're giving them a good quality experience.
Yeah, that's great to hear that about a price spiral going upwards rather than downwards on platforms, which is what is usually the case. If you launch your game and it kind of starts poorly, can you recover afterwards? Is there an opportunity to kind of relaunch it, or come out with more features and kind of have a big blitz, or is it kind of like you've got that one chance of launch and that's it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess this gets back to that point of, there's all kinds of examples of games doing things in different ways, and we definitely see plenty of games that get off to a slow start and build over time. I think the way that we've tended to talk about it is that you can do a lot of work leading up to the launch of your game to build audience, build awareness that your game exists and get people excited about it. If you get to launch day and you haven't done that work, you still kind of have to do that work. You're just going to have to do it after launch while your game is now available. And so we see games where they launch and they don't have a lot of people that know that their game exists. So it gets off to a slow start, but they still work at it, and they still work at making sure that people know their game exists. They're reaching out to streamers, or they're getting press to write about their games. They're figuring out where else people learn about the kinds of games that they play, and they're building that momentum and that energy over time. And also probably continuing to work on their game and add new content and make excuses for customers to care about that game again and again and again after release.
Yeah.
Just a few things to add to that, if I can. One thing that I've heard a couple of times from developers is, there's a rumor going around that Steam makes a decision about a game at launch, and kind of that decision is like solidified.
Throughout the
yeah, exactly. That like, oh, my game didn't have X wish list or didn't sell this amount at the beginning, and so Steam has branded my game as like a failure. That is absolutely not true, and it kind of it's a rumor that continues to circulate. And I think that it's important to kind of understand how Steam works in general, because we don't make those kind of long-term decisions about a game. We're always listening and always kind of thinking, and Steam as a platform is always kind of watching customer behavior. And there are so many examples of games over time that have had really rough launches, whether that's because of technical issue or player expectation or reviews or whatever. And I can think of a number of examples where games 2 years, 3 years later are actually hitting record concurrent player numbers and sales, because a developer kind of said, okay, well, this didn't go exactly as I planned, but now I'm going to listen to feedback. I'm going to continue to work on the game. I'm going to, really address things, and they're getting those benefits long term later on. And of course, Steam as a platform didn't make a decision about them. It's always, listening and kind of watching for a burst of customer activity and saying, okay, more customers are playing this game, we're going to show it to more people. More customers are playing this, we're going to show it to more people. And that could happen 3 years later. So there's really no ton of time frame on that.
Yeah. Actually, that leads nicely into my next question about early access. What advice do you have for developers wanting to go into early access? How regular should you update the game, for example, to keep your community happy?
Yeah, early access is an interesting topic. Just talking to some developers about that, and their question was, should I just make every one of my games early access? Should I just do that automatically because it's going to give me additional visibility and it's going to help me to do a bunch of things? And the answer to that was, I don't know. It might make sense for you to be doing early access, but only if you're thinking about it in terms of a tool. It's a tool to really get customer feedback on your game and to recruit them into the development process. From a Steam side, early access does not give you any extra visibility on the platform. It doesn't give you an extra kind of leg up on the competition. It doesn't kind of give you that extra, way to get extra sales. It's really a tool to help, to get customer feedback. So you should think about it only in those terms. And if you're interested genuinely in trying to get customer involved in the development process and to get their feedback, you should absolutely think about using it. But typically, around half of our top monthly releases are early access games, but I think that's more of a reflection not on them being early access, but on developers finding value in early access as a tool, in their development process. And our number one piece of advice on early access is communicate often. Keep users informed on what you're working on. Tell them, what your development milestones are, what's happening, kind of almost as like a development blog, because if you were to create an early access game and then not actually communicate with your customers, you're sort of breaking the agreement that you're having with your customers in terms of getting their feedback and wanting to hear from them. And honestly, the more transparent you can be with your customers about what it is you're trying to achieve and what it is you're working on, the better. Because I think the games that are most successful in early access, explain, this is what I want to do. This is how it's going. You might change focus over time. You might be getting feedback. The number one thing that I do tell people is that if you're not interested in having their feedback, or if it's really just a 3-month early access period where, you're just kind of doing it to do it as a step is really not a helpful kind of thing to do. You really want to do it when you're really going to be getting that feedback.
Yeah.
Alden, did you have anything you wanted to add on early access?
All good.
No, that was it.
Good stuff. I'm going to ask a few more questions, and then I'll open it out to the audience if you've got something that you want to ask Valve. I want to come on to the Steam Deck, actually, which I'm really enjoying at the moment. I'm looking forward to playing Monkey Island this weekend.
Yeah, good Steam Deck.
Yeah, and you can play it on the EGX floor as well, which is exciting. How easy is it for developers to make sure that their game on Steam will work on the Steam Deck when they launch the game on Steam? Is it pretty straightforward?
It is.
And get that approval, that little green tick.
Well, the verified thing, so I'll talk about the whole thing. So yes, it is pretty easy. And for the most part, what we're hearing from developers is their games actually just work on Steam Deck anyway, without any kind of additional work. And that was the intention of Steam Deck from the start. He's using Proton. It runs the Windows build of your game, and it should just work across the board. Now, there are some additional things that you can do to try to make the experience better. One of the first things is that the games that tend to work best on Steam Deck are games that have controller support, that are built around using a controller. Of course, Steam Deck is really a handheld gaming PC with a controller built in. So, controller support is really, really important. But in addition to that, there are some other kind of things that are worthwhile thinking about in terms of getting the verified status. Some of those things are making sure there isn't a launcher that would prevent a user from being able to access the game, from a Steam Deck. Anti-cheat is another thing. Kind of considering anti-cheat. We go into that a lot more into, in our documentation. It's actually the best place for me to direct people is I can post a link in our chat afterwards here, but there's a link to our documentation. We actually have a guide for, hey, if you don't have a Steam Deck dev kit, this is kind of how to simulate one, and this is how to think about preparing your game for Steam Deck. There are availability for Steam Deck dev kits. They're very limited supply. We have a few of them, so you can also submit a request for a Steam Deck dev kit, and we'll take a look at that request and see if we're able to fulfill it. But ultimately, it should be pretty easy. The last thing is text visibility or legibility is pretty important. So you would want to make sure that your text wasn't too small to read. At the 800 by 600 resolution. So another thing that you could test. But honestly, I'll post a link to the documentation, and I would just check that out and try to see if there's anything you can do in advance.
Great. I'll try and get those links, by the way, and tell you all at the end of the talk or at the end of the next talk after this one. Great. Just a question about live streaming, because that seems to be getting more and more popular. Oh, there we are. Can you see that on the screen, everyone? It's partner.steamgames.com. Flashed up and went away very quickly. I'll make sure that everyone can get that. Yeah, I was going to talk about live streaming, because it seems to be like a lot of developers are doing more of this and getting more streamers and engaging with their audience. Has this been proven to encourage more sales, especially at launch? Is it a good plan to have live streaming of games?
I could talk a little bit about this. As with every game being so very different and there's so many variables around launch, it can be really hard to definitively nail down and attribute additional sales, for example, directly to whether people saw a live stream or not. But the thing that we have seen is that customers do really appreciate the sense of the game that live streams usually offer that often aren't offered by trailers or screenshots of the game. And what I mean by that is watching a live stream of a game, you're often put in the shoes of the player and watching somebody as they're playing the game, as they're interacting with the world. It tends to provide a really very honest and true to form depiction of what it's like to play the game and what you as a player are going to be doing in the game. And I think that's a thing that ends up missing from a lot of game trailers that are cut together ahead of time that tend to focus on narrative or cinematics or things like that. And I think a lot of times what we hear from customers is they want to see what it's like to play the game. What are they going to be doing in the game? What is the core mechanic, the gameplay loop that they're going to be going through over and over again in the game? And live streams give them that kind of that information really well. So yes, you can play live streams on your store page. You can even loop a pre-recorded video there. That can be a great way to just show players what it's like to play your game. If you're actually running a live stream and you're there and you want to chat with customers, you might have to go out of your way to make it really clear that you are actually live and that you're there and ready to respond to questions. Because I think some number of customers have just gotten used to games, running pre-recorded loops again and again. But it can be a great way to engage with your audience and answer questions and get their feedback and kind of get a sense of what customers are interested in or excited about with regards to your game.
Yeah, good stuff. Right, I've got some more questions here, but I'd like to open it out to our audience if we can get the mic ready. So if anyone's got any questions that they've got about their game they're bringing to Steam or about the Steam Deck or anything, just put your hand up. Yeah, there's a question at the back there. I hope you can hear this, Alden and Eric, in a second.
Hiya, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fabulous. So I have a question around Steam Deck in terms of, I guess there's a few things. So you're ramping up production at the moment, and by the end of the year, you're hoping to have a lot more of these back orders out in the ethos. I know that when we launched a game a couple of weeks ago, it took a few days to get that Steam Deck verified tick. And obviously you guys have got a huge backlog as well of games coming out literally every day. So it's a big task. Are you guys looking to highlight Steam Deck games a bit more in the coming months in terms of, I think there's a controller tag that you can add on games. Is there going to be a Steam Deck tag? Is there already? And in terms of when you're accessing games, either on the storefront online or on the Steam Deck directly, are you going to have a Steam Deck area, kind of like you have a VR area at the moment, or Steam Deck specific sales in the future as well?
I'll let Alden tackle this one first because he works on the store itself, and I think that he's a good person to talk about this. And then we can talk a little bit more about kind of the verified process in general.
Yeah, in terms of visibility, there is already a section on the Steam store. If you go under the categories drop down, like there is for VR titles, there's also one for Great on Deck, and that is highlighting the games that have been marked as Great on Deck. And I believe there's also a setting in the search results where you can filter down to be able to narrow that down if you want to just find games that are Great on Deck as well. And of course, this is a thing that we're going to keep expanding and growing over time in terms of how visibility works for these games. There's sort of a chicken and egg, like we got to wait until there's enough Steam Decks in the hands of customers to make it makes sense to be promoting that broadly to a lot of other customers, especially now since we're catching up, but there is still a bit of a backlog. So we want to make sure that enough customers can get their hands on the deck if they're super excited about a particular game. So all of that we're continuing to scale that up and work towards that. And I am 100% certain there will be a sale on Steam Deck verified games at some point. I don't think we have announced that yet, and I actually don't even think that we have put a date on the calendar for that yet, but that is definitely something that will come along at some point.
Great.
And over time, our ability to do the process of reviewing the verification of games is just going to improve. As you mentioned, there's a huge backlog. There's a lot of games. It's actually over 30,000 games on Steam. So, obviously we have a big task to try to review all of those, and it will take a really long time. But we're improving the process and trying to make that as quick as possible for developers. So, stay tuned on kind of improvements in that front.
Great stuff. Thanks for that question. So, anybody else got any questions? I've got a few more. Yep.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So with metrics and conversion statistics for Steam, like a traditional website, it'd be interesting to know what metrics are available to see conversion to wishlist or where your customers are coming from. Is that a feature that's available on Steam?
Yes, that is. We recently, and by recent, I mean sometime during the pandemic, so it all feels like it runs together. We released a feature called UTM tracking, which uses a kind of industry standard tracking mechanism so that you can mark up any of the links that you're putting out there and be able to track that through to wishlist or through to purchase on Steam. There is one kind of catch with that, which is that in order to be able to track that through to purchase and through to wishlist, we need to be able to track the customer all the way through. And so we see that there's some behavior by customers where they might follow a link, they end up in their browser where they're not signed into Steam, and then they go and they open up the Steam desktop client, search for that game, and go through to purchase and wishlist. So there's kind of a gap there where we're unable to be able to follow those customers. That is something that we're working on being able to close that gap so that we give you a more complete picture. But we already find with the amount of tracking that we have in there that a lot of developers are finding some good value in being able to see which of their marketing efforts are converting at which kind of percentages and be able to track that through. So definitely check that out. UTM tracking. It's in the Steamworks documentation. If you look it up, there's all the details there.
Great. I've got another question.
Yeah, I have a follow-up to that actually. So a lot of what I use the Steam area for, particularly before release, is looking at where people are wishlisting and making localization decisions based on that. Mm-hmm. At the moment, it might just be me, I might be using it wrong, but when I'm going through the list of the different regions and looking at the wish lists, you have to be clicking all the drop downs to make that data appear. Is there a way, are you guys looking at being able to export that into something like Excel to make that a bit more user-friendly?
Yes, we have gotten exactly that feedback a bunch. So we are definitely looking at how to more easily expose the regional wish lists. So for those of you out there that don't know that even exists, in the Steamworks reporting portal where you look at your sales, you can go into the regional sales breakdown, and when you expand regions there, specific regions or specific countries, it'll also show wish listing rates for that period of time. So that can be a great way to measure, who are people that are wishlisting your game, what languages do they, or what regions do they live in as a rough proxy for what languages do they speak, and use that to help make localization decisions. And yes, we do hope to make that a lot easier to consume as a developer in the future. Thanks for the feedback.
We could also do a better job of making it more evident that it's there. I think a lot of developers don't even know that you can do that. So it's kind of a buried feature. Yeah.
Actually, following on from that, what are the most popular languages and territories after, English, I suppose, languages? If developers are looking to translate their games, what are the next popular languages that they should perhaps look at targeting first if they've got limited budget?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to be thinking about other languages on Steam. Steam is really as I mentioned, it's really grown and is a much more diverse place than it was 5, 10 years ago. So, it's really important to be thinking about localization. In terms of languages, in order, the languages go after English. English, by the way, is no longer, is the minority language on Steam. It is less than half of the users on Steam, have English selected as their primary language. But the other biggest languages are simplified Chinese, Russian, Spanish, German, Brazilian Portuguese, Korean, French, Turkish, Polish, and Japanese. That's the list of kind of languages that you should be thinking about targeting. But for example, it really depends on your game and your localization needs on what you should be targeting, and also be thinking about what those regional wish lists look like as well. If you have a whole bunch of users who are from Turkey who are wishlisting your game, you might want to think about localizing in Turkey. And that's what that feature is designed for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got time for maybe one more question in the audience. Yes, we've got a question at the front here. Thank you. Going to have to move the mic right to the other side of the room, so we'll be here in a minute. Yeah, good. Here we go.
Hi. So I was wondering if you find that people use the community pages for games a lot, and if you find that there are specific types of games that really benefit from stimulating engagement there.
That's an interesting question. Alden, you want to go first, and we can both kind of tag team this?
Yeah. We definitely see a lot of games making use of that community section, both the developers and customers. I think there's one thing that we like to make clear, which is we are not opposed to you running your community wherever it makes the most sense for you to run your community. So if you'd rather have your community organized on Discord because that's where you're more comfortable interacting with people, that is totally fine. You will still have a community hub on Steam because a lot of customers are just more comfortable interacting there, but you are welcome to organize your community wherever you'd like. We see a lot of customers that look to the Steam community as a way to kind of gauge whether there's an audience built up around this game and whether people are excited about it, talking and sharing ideas. So it can be a useful place for you to seed some conversation or engage with your customers, be able to listen to their feedback, answer their questions, things like that, to help show that you're paying attention as a developer and that you care about their feedback and their input. And it's also it can be a useful place just to see what kind of screenshots players are sharing with each other. It can be a great way to discover bugs in your game because people often take screenshots of the most silliest things that happen in games because they're interesting to share, but you as a developer might find that interesting as, I didn't know that happened in the game. I should go hunt down that bug.
The only thing I'd add is I don't know that we have any information on if there are specific types of games that customers are more likely to be involved in the Steam community versus some other place. I imagine that it's probably more to do with where the developers are. If you as a developer are answering questions and engaging with customers on the Steam Community Hub rather than on Twitter or Discord or wherever else, they're probably going to go where you're engaging with them, and you as a developer should probably be where you think your customers are. And we don't, as Alden mentioned, we don't require you to be in any specific place like on the Community Hub, for instance. It's just kind of wherever it makes the most sense to meet your audience.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, I think we've run out of time. But if developers want to get in touch with you, what's the best way of finding out if they can perhaps get a Steam representative or get in touch with you? What's the best thing to do?
Yeah, so we've designed Steam for the most part to be as self-serve as possible, and we've done that so that we can stay out of the way of developers wanting to do what they need to do. If you want to launch your game, if you want to set your coming soon page live, if you want to run a discount, there's so many things on Steam that you can just do yourself, honestly. But if you do have a question and you need to get help, the best way to reach us is to use the support ticket system, which is the ask for help kind of button on the top of Steamworks. And that's the reason why we suggest that is because those tickets, first, are going to be much easier for us to respond to, either, from a kind of front line, like, hey, I have an emergency, I need help with this particular thing, you know, we can get you help as quickly as possible. But also those tickets end up in the inbox of me and other people on the business team. You know, I spend time every day answering tickets from developers, and so it isn't being sent off to you know, who knows where. You know, those are questions that end up being answered by real people, you know, people like me. And so, you know, that's the best way to do it. And the other thing that's nice about tickets is when you send us a ticket, you know, all of your information is presented to me. So I know what your game is and kind of the history of all the questions that you've asked in the past and you know, what's going on with your game. So it makes it a lot easier to be able to answer you quickly. So that's honestly the best way to reach us these days, is just write a support ticket and we'll get back to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Alden and Eric. I'm so glad that we could talk to you live today on the West Coast. Thank you very much. It's been really informative, and the people here in the audience and online, it's been great for them. So I think a round of applause for Alden and Eric. Thank you. Brilliant.
Thank you so much for having us. We really enjoy this. So
brilliant.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't know if could we get up the chat just to sort of see the links on there. I don't know, could we do that briefly just so people can see that on the screen? We're just covering you up, guys, with a large white space, but it means that we can just get those.
No problem. If you're not able to show it too, you know, all of the information that we've talked about for the links and everything is all in our documentation. So if you search our documentation, you can find it.
Fantastic. Thanks again to Eric and Alden. That was brilliant. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one. Great, fantastic. I love it when that works, because I always kind of think, yeah, it'll be fine. Brilliant. Okay, so our final session today at GI Live is a fireside chat with the CEO of Interior Night and the creation of the indie hit As Dusk Falls. So please welcome Caroline Marshall and also James Batchelor from GamesIndustry.biz.